life is hard, then you die. We're familiar with that old adage, aren't we? Life is hard, then you die. How's that for an encouraging word this morning? A picker-upper for sure. Sorry. A few days back now, perhaps a week or so, I must confess all sense of time has gotten away from me of late. Is that true for you? I read a piece one morning from Richard Rohr where he was referring to Matthew 11:28. And there Jesus says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Yet we know that life is hard, don't we? As I remember it, Rohr was commenting on how hard it is, as he was saying, to bear God. But it's even harder not to bear God. By that, he was addressing the pain that we bring upon ourselves by living outside of evident reality or absolutely denying it. It's usually a greater and longer lasting pain, I've found, to deny the reality of pain and suffering, to push against it, to become angry in the face of it, than the briefer pain of facing it head on, of looking full into the face of it, or sitting even under its tutelage. I've found, I bet you have, that it is true in most of life that deep suffering can be a great teacher if the student is willing. I'm sure we all have stories of the lessons that we've learned in the face of a storm or in times of trial, in loss or pain. And this tends to run counter to how, as people of faith, we often describe the spiritual experience of God as a kind of abiding in God, a practice of resting in God, a sense of peace and delight, even ecstasy at times. So I want you to think with me today about our faith in times of trouble, in times of burden, suffering. Our faith can offer us deep joy, especially so, even in the midst of burden, trial, or sorrow. According to the Apostle Paul, our faith teaches us to be content in all things, in all circumstances. If there is no inherent contentment or peace in the midst of our trouble, then our faith is not the real thing. To seek joy in God and peace within, especially in times of trouble and burden, this is indeed an act of faith and trust. So today, during this string of days of social isolation and distancing, we are reminded to seek the silver lining that is present even in the darkest of clouds, to rest in the good, the true, the beautiful, even in times when times seem to be the worst. Rohr said, "If you look deeply inside every success, there are already seeds and signs of limits. If you look inside every failure, there are also seeds and signs of opportunity." I like that. As I stated Easter Sunday morning, I believe with all that I am in the resurrection, and that it matters as much today as ever before, as it did for the first disciples. I believe Easter teaches us that the worst thing is never the last thing. So be reminded and encouraged today. We are resurrection people. We know this truth readily, deep in our hearts. There's a universal pattern of death and life, of loss and renewal, of death and resurrection. It's the lesson of the Gospels and of Jesus' life. You would think it might be utterly clear to us by now, especially now. Yet I confess, some days I still fight against would-be resurrections and new life. Oh God, forgive me of my sin. Increase our faith. Help us in our unbelief. We know in you our yoke is easy and our burden is light. So until we meet again, do stay safe. May you stay well. And please stay connected to God and one another. Blessings.